Great. So as Gary said, our topic is speed limits, balancing marketing automation with compliance and personalization, and we're going to add into that as well. So we'll kick it right off here right away, and I'd like to start with Larry. So Larry, what impact does compliance have on the efforts to shift from campaign-based marketing to automated next best action marketing at pace and scale?
Well, I know the title implies compliance drives is a speed limit. I think of it a little bit counter to that. When I think of compliance is core to everything we do. It's built into everything we do.
So you can just
from a from a campaign. I think
like Gary's
mic's still on. Compliance is embedded in everything we do from a campaign-based perspective. So as we look to automate, that's going to be built in there as well. So I don't see compliance as a speed bump or a speed limiter. Where I think the risk starts to come in is if we start to prioritize as we look to capitalize on the benefits of volume and velocity, is that if that outpaces strategy and outpaces value. And speaking of Gary and his mic on, he had made a mention the other day about the title and about speed limits, and it stuck with me. This idea that speed limits, they're not inherently bad or good. They're there for a reason. Just because you can drive 100 kilometers an hour doesn't mean you should drive 100 kilometers an hour through a subdivision. And in the same way as we look to capitalize on those benefits of volume and velocity, we need to make sure that we're putting in place those so-called speed limits to ensure that pace and volume is not exceeding strategy and the value. And so if you think about it as we look to that pace, things like test and learn your way into into velocity and volume. And so maybe I'll leave it at that.
Okay, that sounds good. So we'll rotate. Lipika, many consider that compliances are licensed to play, but isn't it also a creativity killer? So Gen AI, hyper-personalization, they're racing ahead. Can marketing be bold when legal is in the back seat with a handbrake?
I bet the legal folks in the room are like, what do you mean? I'm in the front seat. I drive this thing and prevent you guys from crashing and burning all the time. So listen, I love tech. I love innovation. I'm a techie. And in my role, I have the job to bring personalization, hyper-personalization, transformation to our customers. But I have to remind myself that I'm not in the business of tech. I'm in the business of bringing the value of innovation to customers' financial needs. And so when we pick personalization, Gen AI use cases, it's great for marketing to be at the forefront. But what we've done then is, if I think about what am I asking my compliance partners, my legal partners to do is, I'm asking them for AI governance. I'm asking them for AI governance at scale. I'm asking legal for the right kinds of disclosures. I'm asking to do everything in line with tone and brand messaging. I'm asking them to be in line with data practices, data handling, access management. I'm asking them to be in line with security practices. I'm asking them to be in line with privacy regulations, consent management, and opt-in. So I've now dragged the whole organization into my use case, right? And so with that, then comes the inherent need to balance speed and keeping the bank in line with all of these regulations, which exist for a reason. And so then the question becomes, how do you balance the two? And that's where I think you have to. It comes down to three things. Number one is having that common goal. Are we all driving, to use your analogy, driving in the same direction towards the same goals? Why are we doing what we're doing? And then creating that shared collaboration space. I think the RegTech, MarTech integration, that ecosystem it's a really hot space right now. And I think bringing in the compliance workflows, legal approvals, pre-approved templates, and all of that into marketing automation is really where the value is. So yeah, I think you could still have a good ride if you put your seatbelts on.
That's great. That's great to hear those perspectives. Mark, so you've worked across many MarTech compliance ecosystems with Capco and other roles. What value does a shared data model unlock, and why is it so hard to achieve inside banks? And really, is the MarTech stack, Lipika, you just kind of hinted at this, is that stack fundamentally broken in banking and ripe for some work?
Yeah, those are great questions, especially about whether the stack is broken. I think, in my experience in the larger banks, institutions that we're working with, we're actually seeing that it's not that there's a lack of great ideas of what to do. It's really more a limit of the current business and technical architecture to unlock what you're able to do from engaging your customers personally. You've mentioned hyper-personalization a couple of times. I just kind of wanted to zoom out for a minute, recognizing we're not in a room full of marketers, so some of these kind of like buzz terms might sort of hang out there a minute. When we're talking about hyper-personalization, it's really moving from audience-based, campaign-based targeting down to an audience of one, where we're engaging you in personalized experiences as you're interacting with the brand in near real time or real time, if possible. And when I think about the three major kind of buckets of interaction that are really ripe for hyper-personalization that we're seeing larger institutions do, particularly banks, it's sort of your acquisition conversion moments in the acquisition funnel, and particularly those that might have a regulatory component to it. So a soft credit pool to make a firm credit card offer, for example, there's a regulatory component there, compliance piece for sure. That's one example. Another would be onboarding to your digital products, so new account onboarding. Those are really ripe for hyper-personalization. And then, of course, your early stage servicing. So the first few times your new customer comes in or customer's calling into a digital channel, they really want to have that seamless experience from a good quality servicing perspective. And that also has an opportunity to be personalized. So where I really think the opportunity sits, the challenge in being able to unlock and do all of that well, it's really not so much, like I said at the beginning, a gap of ideas, but it's a gap of orchestration to be able to orchestrate across those three interactions. And there's three pieces to it. One is decentralized data. It's a big problem. You have some of your customer data sitting in the product lane, in the servicing lane, in the marketing lane, in the sales lane, if you have a B2B side for client acquisition. So there's the data piece. Then you have the manual workflow. So anywhere you're processing things through a manual workflow, that's just ripe for risk from a compliance perspective. And then the last piece of it is what we talk a lot about, of privacy by design and consent-driven marketing. So I think the real opportunity right now is to start integrating some of the new and kind of ever-changing regulatory requirements actually into the data layer and building that in early so that you can start to take action on it more quickly and see what those journeys look like. But in that way, compliance isn't a handbrake, I think was one of the questions that came up somewhere. It can actually accelerate because now you know what we're engaging from a hyper-personalized perspective is compliant. So I don't have to worry about legal coming in or risk or whoever because I've got those sort of like regulatory infrastructure baked into the data and decisioning layer.
No, that's great. And just for context, Mark and I actually are based in the U.S., so we work down there with a number of large banks.
Yeah,
some
my
of
accent
them,
probably gave me away.
Well, Mark's American. I'm actually Canadian, so I will say out and about, and they'll hear me say that in Charlotte. But we work with banks, with 80+ million customers, and the complexity there is equal to or greater than what any of the banks here in Canada would face. But I spent 10 years here. And so one of the reasons Naehas is here is obviously we think the problems that the U.S. has been working on for the last decade around these are relevant here in Canada as well. So I'm going to go back to Larry here and talking about, again, speed. Like you said, it's not always good, it's not always bad. But what lessons has RBC learned in moving from those traditional campaign-based marketing to that client engagement driven by next best action?
What I'd say is, there's all the core components Mark touched on, making sure the data, getting all the data aggregated into one place. There's keeping the client at the center. There's being well choreographed in terms of your communication across all of your channels, being relevant, being timely, all of those things. But maybe what I'll do is I'll zero in on and leave you with kind of two sound bites. So on the one side, growing up telecom, I'll put a parallel to there and say, don't be an auto dialer. And then the second one that I would say is don't shrink yourself to greatness. And what I mean by the auto dialer is, as we look to automation, the benefit is this scale, like I talked about before, the scale, the volume, the velocity, but it can't be at the expense of strategy and value. And so take email as an equivalent to the auto dialer, and it's like we've got an incredibly efficient, effective channel that enables this communication that's relevant, timely, that can play a big role in what we do. But it's also very easily overused and leads to over communication and leads to all these other things. So I talked about before, putting in speed limits for ourselves, like a self-imposed speed limit, can be something as simple as, well, with email, just make sure that your opt-out rate is not exceeding your lift. So, don't be an auto dialer, and email is one of those examples. And then the second one that I said was with respect to, what was my second one? I am blanking.
Telecom was one.
Telecom was the first. And then my second one, hold on.
I thought they were both telecom.
Oh, thank you. That's right. Of course. How could I forget that? Don't shrink yourself to greatness. Mark talked about getting down to an audience of one and being hyper relevant. When you think about it, it's like we can be so incredibly effective at targeting and driving to conversion that we can get ourselves to the point where we're so good at driving to conversion and targeting and being so hyper targeted that we lose the benefit of the scale that comes with it. So just be careful you don't shrink yourself to greatness. So those would be the two things I'd leave you with: is don't be an auto dialer and don't shrink yourself to greatness.
Okay, great. So Lipika, I gave you this question in advance, but I'm going to throw an extra one at you just to mix it up, okay? Because you touched on a few things. But so first part A is really what's more dangerous, going too fast or going too slow? And then the second part is you said, I'm not a technology company, I'm a bank, right? So when you are trying to move at scale, what kind of response do you get from the technology organization when you say, here's what we want to achieve from a personalization level? Are they typically saying, hey, that sounds great, we're all in, or are there other responses that come back?
Okay, so the first question, too fast or too slow, I'm going to give you a consulting answer, which is you've got to find the Goldilocks zone. No. Well, for some, it depends on the use case. For some use cases where you have, if it's a Gen AI for content gen, automating your knowledge management systems, the inherent risk is low and the impact is quite high, right? You can drive some immediate efficiencies there. So I think those ones organizations need to chase fast. And then, on the other hand, you have all these hyper-personalization use cases. There was an interesting one that I was looking at a few days back, direct investing. Not just making recommendations based on, your investing behavior, retirement plans based on your life stage. It is actually taking it to the next level and placing the trade on your behalf. So that, do I want to be a first mover there? I don't think so, right? So to me, I think it depends on the use case, it depends on the risk appetite, but points well made. If you bake that into your stack, if you have the right kind of data, the decisioning, then you obviously have to layer in things like, any model that you're trying to do, be it foundational or be it some of the legacy propensities, there has to be that degree of explainability, right? So as long as you have that, you can bank on that, and then that gives you the comfort of chasing some of these some of these use cases. I would say the most value is in the low to mid. The high, I think that's where people still need to interact with the human, and so that's where I think you can take a more balanced approach in your in chasing velocity, and you will not be penalized. If anything, you'll be rewarded with for having a culture of care.
Okay, that's great.
And then on the next question,
Part
which
B.
is what do I hear from tech companies? Okay.
Or actually, your technology partners.
My technology partners.
When you want to move forward with something new.
Okay. A lot of these capabilities are obviously supported through vendor-managed services. It's just the nature of the beast. So if I think back, your Oxford Dictionary defines personalization as you're tailoring it to someone's specific needs. Salesforce will define personalization as you are delivering a communication that is custom based on the information that you have about the customer. So right there, your whole ecosystem is at play. What I hear from my tech partners, and which includes, by extension, the vendors that we work with, is that the data models are broken. We have a ton of data which is siloed. There's no way to bring it together. And so breaking that barrier across businesses, that's where I think the tech companies want organizations like marketing to kind of push. Then it's around just making sure that all the different players, be it legal with the disclosures or our agencies creating the content, there's space, there's access there for them to scale. It's not necessarily pushback. It is we can only go as fast as the organization can move. Like, this is not about activating, switching the lights on tech. This really is about the organization holding hands. So to me, I think the tech partnership within the organization is fantastic. It's the legacy, the TED debt, as well as the pace at which the organization can move that's limiting.
Okay. Oh, that's a great answer. And if they like working with you, they'll always try to find a way, I think, right? That's a good segue to a question I have for Mark here. So, Mark, one of the major problems we see in the work we do together is that the MarTech stack at banks and compliance workflow, they're disparate systems, right? So that's a term we use all the time. And so, they don't share a common data model. So what is the value the banks can realize? Kind of what Lipika just said. What can they realize when they all share a common infrastructure? And how do we get there?
Yeah, well, as I talked earlier about the data silos, and we're all familiar with that, it doesn't just sit within marketing, although a lot of times marketing is trying to solve that. We have disparate data silos just within the four walls of marketing. But the real unlock of value, I think, is when you bring across all the business where you have customer data and customer signals, intent signals sitting. So that could be in sales, that could be marketing, that can be servicing, that can be across the kind of life cycle, and bringing all that intended data together. I think the important piece also is, I spoke about this earlier, it's this consent-driven marketing, privacy by design. I want to bring that back up again. I actually think one of the biggest accelerators to this opportunity that we're talking about and unlocking value is in the increasing regulatory environment that we have, the pace of change from a regulatory perspective, but then also kind of Google's on again, off again relationship with third-party cookies. I don't even know where that sits right now, but at least in the US, it's really led to a lot of the larger banks that Steve and I work with to moving away toward first-party data identifiers and first-party data structures. So therefore, that means then customer intent, consent-based marketing across channels really becomes the thing that you have to wrestle to unify into a central view of the customer, the ubiquitous 360-degree view of the customer. However, that's not enough. So centralized data is important, consent-based data, but then I think the next piece really is that streamlined workflow that can take care of things like your product and pricing component decisions, your disclosures, and being able to get to the place of doing that dynamic disclosure. your digital asset management. And as you're assembling those different offers and you're pushing those offers out, whether they're marketing related offers or more just the customer experience of the digital product, and you're putting that together in real time, having your data centralized is the first piece, but putting that common workflow across with a way of dynamically interacting with those disclosures is super, super critical. And I mean, we're seeing a lot of institutions that are doing that. It's kind of a mix. Some larger are still doing a lot of homegrown stuff. I mean, I'm sure it's the same way here too. You know, you've had your legacy infrastructure for a long time. You have some vendor-provided pieces, but you probably also have some homegrown pieces, particularly with your most sensitive data. And so certainly there is this concept in MarTech today around composability and being able to pull apart your stack and put it together what you need. But I actually think there still is a place for, it might not be a full stack vendor, but a single point vendor that can bring these critical functions together. Workflow, disclosure, pricing components, and integrating that into that centralized view of the customer. That's an important piece. It's a lot of work, but I think that's the answer to the question of how to unlock the value.
Yeah, that sounds good. It's iterative, right? You're not going to unravel, years and investment in applications, right? So, but you have to kind of figure out how to start and build upon that, right? So Larry, you covered next best action in detail there, but how do you build automation into the process to update a personalized offer and get it delivered after you've decided on that? We had a chance to catch up this morning over coffee, and when we say automation, right, it can be confusing. Mark, you touched on not everybody in here is in marketing, right? So there's an automation component, obviously, to discover what that offer should be, right? But then when you know that, you got to go make it happen, right? And that's where the complexity comes in, and the silos, and the many teams, and the compliance, and all of a sudden it's taking, in the banks we talk to in the U.S., right, 120, 150, 180 days. There's IT requests involved, and that it just, again, we want to move quickly there. How do we do that? How do you get it to under 30 days from your perspective and in your experience?
Yeah, with next best action, we've got the benefit of having kind of a clean slate when you start. So, we were talking earlier, and in for marketing across the board, I'm kind of embarking on a pretty significant journey right now to reduce speed to market from by 25 to 50%. But that's a massive deconstruct, reconstruct the process. With MBA, we're starting from a point where it's a blank slate. And so there's a couple things that factor into it. It's the how you organize around it. And so that's, for example, it's organizing around pods, dedicated pods, client-centric pods, where you've got representation from all of your core delivery partners. So you're no longer having to jockey for position within a queue, for example. It's the what. You have the opportunity to zero in on put it this concept of fewer, frequent, faster. So you narrow it down to quarterly type activities where you're hyper-focused on the priorities. And so that team that's no longer jockeying for position is highly focused on getting that thing out the door. And then the other component of it is, and this leads, I think, a little bit more into what you were talking about, Steve, as well, is just this idea of modularity. So no longer should you be looking at this idea of building it from end to end. It's about how do you fill your shelf with your actions, those next best actions. And that's everything, yes, from offers, but it could be fraud messaging, it could be disclosures. How do you fill that shelf with all of those components so that when you are hyper-focused on delivering something that's more of an assembly than it is constructing from the ground up?
Yep, no, that word assembly is key, right? Because as you get to those smaller segments, and yeah, I spent years working in pricing, and there was this holy grail of the pricing to one, and I don't think anyone's ever achieved it, nor did it really make sense, right? That everybody's going to have their unique price. Executing on that was the big challenge. But you get to smaller and smaller segments, and like you said, the modularity and the assembly component is efficient there. Almost out of time here, so just a quick last round of questions here. Lipika, back to you. have you had an exciting marketing idea recently that actually had to get killed off because of, call it cost, compliance? Can you share any thoughts on that?
We've been down this path of trying to do a lot of Gen AI use case testing in market. We've tried to do a few that are low key. A recent idea was to be able to just create a completely AI-based ad from scratch with a baked-in approval process. That did not fly. And obviously, we're still early stages, and so that human oversight is required. But that was one that, where we tried to test, is it possible for us to expedite all pieces of automation, to your point? And we did hit a lot of roadblocks there.
Okay, good. Larry, do you have one? Something that maybe got killed off?
I'd go back to like the idea of I would echo the human oversight is critical. The other thing I would say is it's less about something specific. It's more about things like, because compliance is built into everything we do. It's more like the idea of people trying to circumvent the process, right, and go direct to a channel to drive something at pace.
Okay, that's good. And Mark, and some of the clients you're working with, you've come across any ideas that were brilliant but then just couldn't see the light of day?
We did have one, and it was really around dynamic creating of disclosures. So real-time disclosure assembly, which to kind of similar point that you had, Lipika, where the approval just didn't fly. Trying to do that approval very, very quickly. It was a little bit of a pre-approval logic that they baked in, and then legal couldn't get behind that. So it's not so much that the idea was bad, it was just ahead of its time from an AI governance perspective that was being leveraged to bring that approval forward.
Okay, that's great. Well, thank you to our panelists here. We just got another minute or so. We don't want to be the hold back from you and lunch here. So just want to thank you guys for your time and preparation and for the insights today.
Thank you.